The city outside was a symphony of sharp angles and impatient lights, a relentless pulse that had defined Alara's days for far too long. But tonight, a whispered promise, an address scribbled on a linen napkin, had guided her away from the familiar hum. She stood before a facade of aged stone and wrought iron, an anachronism nestled between sleek glass towers. No flashing neon, no boisterous clamor. Only a single, discreet lantern cast a warm golden glow over a heavy, unassuming door. A tremor, not of cold but of anticipation, traced its way up her spine. She pushed the door open, and the city's roar was instantly muted, replaced by a deep, resonant hush. The air inside was a luxurious exhale. It enveloped her, warm and rich, perfumed with the sophisticated blend of aged whiskey, sandalwood, and the faint intoxicating sweetness of jasmine. Her eyes, accustomed to the stark brightness of the street, slowly adjusted to the twilight within. It was a realm of velvet and shadow, where amber light pooled in intimate alcoves and danced on polished mahogany. The room was a study in opulent comfort. Deep armchairs and settees, upholstered in jewel-toned velvets, invited surrender. Persian rugs, their patterns softened by time, lay scattered like forgotten secrets on the dark wood floor. Antique mirrors, framed in ornate gold, reflected the flickering candlelight, multiplying the soft glow. A low, soulful jazz melody, woven with the melancholic cry of a saxophone, drifted from an unseen source, a gentle current carrying hushed conversations and the delicate clink of ice against crystal. Alara took a hesitant step inside, feeling as though she had crossed a threshold not just into a different space, but into a different time. She wore a dress the color of midnight, its silk clinging to her curves with a whisper-soft embrace, chosen specifically for this venture into the unknown. It was a dress that felt both daring and demure, a reflection of the conflicting desires that had led her here. Her gaze swept across the room, drawn to the details, a half-empty snifter of amber liquid gleaming on a small inlaid table. A woman with eyes like emeralds laughing softly into the ear of her companion. The way the light caught the intricate embroidery on a curtain. Everything here spoke of discretion, of indulgence, of a world designed for those who appreciated the exquisite. And then she saw him. He was not on a stage, nor was he overtly commanding attention. Yet, he was the undeniable center of the room's subtle gravity. He stood by a grand, dark wood bar, his back partially to her, conversing with a bartender, whose movements were as fluid and practiced as a dancer's. His posture was effortless, radiating an inherent authority. The dark fabric of his tailored suit draped over broad shoulders, hinting at the power beneath. As he turned slightly, the light caught the silver in his dark hair, just at the temples, a distinguished counterpoint to the youthful intensity of his profile. A shiver, more profound than the first, ran through Alara. It wasn't just his appearance, though he was undeniably handsome, in a way that defied casual categorization. It was the aura that surrounded him, an almost palpable sense of quiet strength, of deep waters, of a knowing that seemed to predate time itself. He was the velvet, the shadow, the whiskey and the jasmine, all distilled into one compelling presence. He gestured subtly, and the bartender nodded, turning to prepare a drink. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he slowly turned his head. Their eyes met across the hushed expanse of the room. His eyes were the color of rich, dark amber, flecked with gold, and they held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was no surprise in them, no fleeting curiosity, but rather a deep, almost ancient recognition. It was as if he had been expecting her, as if her arrival was not an event, but a preordained part of the evening's unfolding. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips, a subtle curve that promised more than it revealed. Alara felt a flush creep up her neck, a heat that had nothing to do with the room's warmth. She couldn't look away, nor did she want to. His gaze was a silken thread, drawing her in, unraveling something within her that she hadn't realized was so tightly wound. The jazz seemed to deepen, the saxophone's wail now a personal serenade just for her. He held her gaze for what felt like an eternity, a silent conversation passing between them that needed no words. Then with a fractional tilt of his head, he broke the connection, turning back to the bar as his drink was presented. The spell, however, lingered, a shimmering veil between them. She found herself drifting towards a small unoccupied table tucked away in a corner, draped with a heavy damask cloth. Slipping into one of the plush high-backed chairs, she felt its embrace, a comforting cocoon. Her heart still thrummed a little faster than usual. She needed a moment, a breath to gather herself. A server, moving with graceful quietude, appeared at her side. He was discreet, efficient, almost ethereal. "Welcome," he murmured, his voice soft as brushed suede. "May I get you something?" A whiskey," Ilara said, surprised at the slight tremor in her own voice. "Something smooth, and perhaps a single large ice sphere." She rarely drank whiskey, preferring lighter, crisper spirits. But tonight, the scent of it in the air, the deep amber liquid she'd seen him hold, called to something primal within her. The server nodded, a faint knowing smile playing on his lips, and glided away. Ilara watched him go, then let her gaze wander back to the man by the bar. He was now leaning against it, one hand tucked casually into his pocket, the other holding the snifter. He seemed to be observing the room, a silent guardian of its secrets, occasionally offering a brief, enigmatic smile to a passing patron. He hadn't looked her way again, yet Ilara felt his presence acutely, a magnetic pull that resonated deep within her. This place, she thought, was more than just a lounge. It was a carefully curated experience, a sanctuary for the senses, a whispered invitation to shed the mundane and embrace something richer, deeper. She had heard rumors about the Velvet Room, as some called it, a place where time slowed, where desires were acknowledged without judgment, where the night promised a different kind of awakening. And now, sitting amidst its hushed elegance, she understood. Her whiskey arrived, a generous pour of liquid gold in a heavy crystal glass, the single ice sphere gleaming like a pearl. The aroma was complex, hinting at caramel and oak, with a subtle floral note. She took a sip, letting the warmth bloom on her tongue, spreading a comforting heat through her chest. It was indeed smooth, a slow burn that felt luxurious and illicit. She watched the other patrons, a fascinating tableau of quiet indulgence. Couples leaned close, their words hushed, their hands often intertwined. Solitary figures nursed their drinks, lost in contemplation, yet never seeming truly alone. Everyone here seemed to share a common understanding, a silent pact of appreciation for the moment. Her gaze drifted back to him. He was no longer at the bar. He was moving through the room now, a phantom of grace and purpose, gliding between tables, exchanging quiet words, a touch on a shoulder, a shared glance. He moved with an innate confidence, like a predator in its natural habitat, utterly at ease, utterly in control. As he drew closer to her corner of the room, Ilara's breath hitched again. He was heading in her direction. Not directly, not obviously, but with an undeniable trajectory. Her fingers tightened around the cool crystal of her glass. A nervous flutter began in her stomach, a delicious anxiety. He paused at a nearby table, offering a few soft words to a couple. His voice a low, resonant rumble that carried just enough for Ilara to discern its rich timbre. It was a voice that promised comfort and intrigue in equal measure, a voice that could unravel secrets or weave new ones. Then his eyes found hers again. This time, there was no surprise, only that deep, knowing recognition, and the subtle, slow curve of his lips. He excused himself from the couple with a graceful nod and took a few more deliberate steps until he stood by her table. "Good evening," he said, his voice closer now, a warm current that seemed to flow directly into her. It was even richer, more textured than she had imagined, carrying a faint, pleasant rasp. "I trust you're finding your comfort here?" Ilara looked up at him, her heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He was even more striking up close. His eyes truly were amber, flecked with gold, and held an intensity that was almost dizzying. A faint scent of cedar and something uniquely masculine, perhaps his skin, mingled with the whiskey and jasmine already in the air. "Good evening," she managed, her voice a little breathy. "Yes, exquisitely so. It's unlike anywhere I've been." A genuine smile now touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "That, I hope, is the intention. We aim to create a space where the outside world recedes, and the inner world can breathe a little easier." He glanced at her whiskey. "A fine choice for a first visit. Our midnight ember." "Midnight ember," Ilara repeated, tasting the words. "It suits the place." "Indeed. As do you, if I may say so." His gaze lingered on her, a slow, appreciative sweep that felt less like an appraisal and more like a gentle, profound acknowledgement. It was intimate, yet not intrusive. "I am Julian, the curator of this little sanctuary." He extended a hand, long-fingered and strong, his touch as warm and firm as the whiskey. "Ilara," she replied, her own hand feeling small and delicate in his. The contact sent a jolt, a warmth that spread swiftly through her arm and into her chest. His skin was smooth, his grip confident. A spark, undeniable and electric, passed between them. "Ilara." He savored her name, the sound a soft caress on his lips. A name that evokes starlight. Fitting. He released her hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered. A phantom imprint. "Please don't let me interrupt your solitude. I merely wish to ensure you were settled." "You're not interrupting," Ilara quickly assured him, a blush rising. "I was just taking it all in." "And what are your impressions, Ilara?" He leaned slightly against the edge of her table, not sitting, but creating a closer proximity, his presence enveloping her. His body was a subtle symphony of lean strength, barely contained by the fine fabric of his suit. "It feels timeless," she mused, choosing her words carefully. "And very, very intentional. Every detail seems to hum with a purpose." Julian's smile deepened, a private, knowing expression. "You are perceptive. This place, Velvet Dreams as some patrons affectionately call it, was indeed built with intention. It is a haven for those who appreciate the texture of life, the nuance of desire, the quiet symphony of senses that often gets lost in the cacophony of the day." His voice was a seductive murmur, a balm and a challenge all at once. He paused, his eyes holding hers, and Ilara felt a curious weight in her chest, a longing she couldn't quite name. He seemed to see into her, to understand the unspoken yearnings that had drawn her here tonight. "Are you, Ilara?" he continued, his voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper. "One who seeks to rediscover those textures, to listen to that quiet symphony?" The question hung in the air, charged with meaning. It wasn't about the drink or the decor anymore. It was about something far deeper, far more personal. Her gaze flickered to his lips, then back to his eyes, searching for answers, for permission, for an invitation. "I think," she said, her voice barely audible, "I might be." A slow, deliberate breath escaped Julian's lips, as if her answer was precisely what he had anticipated, what he had waited for. "Excellent," he murmured, the word a soft caress. "Because Velvet Dreams holds many such textures, many melodies, and some, Ilara, are best experienced beyond the main room." He straightened, his eyes still locked with hers. A silent question, a powerful invitation hanging in the air between them. The jazz music swelled momentarily, a playful, suggestive note from the saxophone. Ilara's heart pounded, a frantic drum beat in the quiet elegance of the room. She felt a delicious terror, a profound excitement. The night, she realized, had only just begun to unfurl its velvet secret. And Julian, with his amber eyes and his knowing smile, was offering her the key. She felt a delicious terror, a profound excitement. The night, she realized, had only just begun to unfurl its velvet secrets. And Julian, with his amber eyes and his knowing smile, was offering her the key. "The key?" she echoed, her voice barely a whisper, a delicate tremor running through it, a question that was already half a surrender. He smiled. a slow, captivating curve of his lips that seemed to acknowledge her apprehension and her desire all at once. To a different kind of evening, Alara. One where the world outside fades and only what's between us remains. He extended a hand, palm up, an invitation both ancient and utterly modern. His fingers were long, elegant and capable, promising both strength and tenderness. She hesitated for only a heartbeat, a delicious internal debate playing out in the space between her racing pulse and the quiet hum of the room. Then, with a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, she placed her hand in his. His skin was warm, firm, and a shiver, not of cold, but of pure electric anticipation danced up her arm. He didn't squeeze, merely held her, a gentle but undeniable connection, a soft anchor in the swirling currents of her emotion. "Shall we?" he murmured, his thumb stroking lightly over her knuckles, a small gesture that sent a jolt of awareness through her. She nodded, unable to speak, her throat suddenly dry, her gaze locked with his. The unspoken understanding that passed between them was more potent than any words. He led her away from the vibrant hum of the lounge, past hushed conversations and the clinking of glasses. Their movement was fluid, almost a dance, their hands linked, a silent conversation unfolding between them. The jazz music softened as they moved further into the hotel's opulent embrace, the low thrum of a double bass following them like a discreet chaperone. He guided her to a private elevator, its polished brass doors gleaming under the subtle lighting. Inside, the ascent was swift and silent, the city lights a blur outside the panoramic glass panel. The intimacy of the enclosed space, the subtle scent of his cologne surrounding her, was intoxicating. She could feel the warmth radiating from his hand, still holding hers, a constant, reassuring presence. The elevator doors opened onto a private landing, hushed and richly carpeted. He led her down a short hallway, stopping at a heavy dark wood door. He produced a card key, a modern counterpoint to his old-world charm, and the lock clicked softly, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet air. He pushed the door open, stepping aside, and gestured for her to enter first. "After you, Alara." She stepped into a world of hushed luxury, a suite clearly designed for comfort and intimacy. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city, a glittering tapestry of lights stretching to the horizon. The room was dimly lit, bathed in the soft glow of strategically placed lamps and the reflected urban shimmer. A plush, cream-colored carpet muffled their footsteps, enhancing the sense of secluded sanctuary. A magnificent four-poster bed, draped in sheer silk, dominated one area, but it wasn't the immediate focal point. Instead, her eyes were drawn to a small, elegant sitting area near the windows. Two velvet armchairs facing each other, a low table between them, already set with a chilled bottle of champagne, and two flutes. A subtle fire crackled in a sleek, modern fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air was subtly scented with something warm and inviting, sandalwood, and perhaps a hint of vanilla, a fragrance that seemed to wrap around her, drawing her deeper into the moment. "Julian," she breathed, turning to him, her voice filled with a quiet awe. He closed the door softly behind them, plunging them into a deeper sense of privacy, a world entirely their own. "I thought we might appreciate a more private vantage point for our conversation." His eyes, like liquid amber in the subdued light, roamed over her face, lingering on her parted lips, before meeting her gaze with an intensity that made her heart flutter. He gently released her hand, then gestured towards the armchairs. "Please, make yourself comfortable." She drifted towards the window, drawn by the mesmerizing view, then sank into one of the armchairs, the velvet cool and soft against her bare arms. He moved with a quiet grace, uncorking the champagne with a barely audible pop. The delicate fizz filled the silence, a cheerful counterpoint to the anticipation in the room. He poured 2 glasses, the bubbles catching the light, and handed one to her. "To the night," he said. His voice, a low, resonant rumble, raising his glass. "And to unexpected connections." "To unexpected connections," she echoed, clinking her glass softly against his. The chilled champagne was crisp, sparkling on her tongue, a delightful counterpoint to the warmth that was already spreading through her veins. He settled into the armchair opposite her, leaning back, one arm resting along the top of the velvet. His gaze never truly left her, a constant, comforting presence that made her feel seen. Truly seen. "Tell me, Alara," he began, his voice soft, "what brought you to this city tonight, beyond the obvious conference?" She took a sip of champagne, buying herself a moment to gather her thoughts. How much to reveal. Everything about this man this evening felt like an invitation to shed her usual guardedness, to peel back the layers she presented to the world. A desire for something new, perhaps, she admitted, a small, self-conscious smile playing on her lips. A change of scenery, a break from routine. Life had become predictable. He nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes, a mirroring of a sentiment she hadn't known he shared. Predictability can be a comfort, but it can also be a cage. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees, holding his glass loosely. "And what kind of freedom are you seeking, Alara?" The question hung in the air, intimate and searching, touching a nerve she hadn't realized was so sensitive. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a telltale sign of her vulnerability. I'm not entirely sure," she confessed, her gaze dropping to the dancing flames in the fireplace, finding a temporary solace in their mesmerizing flicker. Perhaps just the freedom to feel intensely, vividly, without apology. He reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against her arm, a fleeting, electric touch that made her shiver, a current of pure sensation. "Then perhaps you've come to the right place. This city, this night, it has a way of awakening dormant senses." His voice was a caress, his touch a silent promise that thrilled her to her core. She looked up, meeting his gaze, a quiet challenge in her own. "And you, Julian, what awakens your senses?" His smile was slow, enigmatic, a hint of something deeper in his eyes. "Many things. The whisper of a storm approaching, the scent of old books, the taste of a perfectly aged single malt." He paused, his eyes dropping to her lips, lingering there for a beat, then back up to her eyes, creating a delicious tension. But most profoundly, the quiet courage of a woman who dares to seek her own passion. Her heart gave a little leap, a joyous flutter. He saw her, truly saw her. Not just the elegant dress, or the composed exterior, but the nascent yearning beneath, the yearning she was only just beginning to acknowledge in herself. You're very observant," she managed, her voice a little breathy, a testament to the effect he had on her. "It's a necessary skill in my line of work," he replied smoothly, a hint of his professional life peeking through. "Though tonight, I find my observations are less about business, and more about pleasure." He refilled their glasses. The conversation flowed easily, effortlessly, from the superficial to the deeply personal. They talked about their passions, their dreams, their regrets. She found herself telling him things she hadn't confided in anyone, drawn out by his steady gaze, his genuine interest, the profound sense of safety he seemed to exude. He, in turn, shared glimpses of his world. A life lived across continents, driven by a keen intellect and a restless spirit, yet always with an underlying current of searching, of longing for something more profound than mere success. He spoke of art, of history, of the subtle nuances of human nature, captivating her with his depth and eloquence. As the hours melted away like ice in a warm drink, the champagne bottle emptied, replaced by a deep, rich red wine that mirrored the growing intensity between them. The fire in the hearth had settled into a steady glow, its embers casting long dancing shadows on the walls, and the city lights outside seemed to dim, becoming a soft, distant hum, a backdrop to their private world. Julian shifted in his chair, turning slightly towards her, his knee almost touching hers. The proximity was a soft hum beneath her skin, a quiet vibration that resonated deep within her. "Alara," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register, a warm, resonant sound. "You have a remarkable way of making the mundane feel extraordinary. And you, Julian, have a remarkable way of making the extraordinary feel inevitable, she countered, her gaze locked with his, a silent challenge and invitation in her eyes. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken desires, a heady perfume that made her senses reel. He reached out, his hand slowly, deliberately, tracing the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing over the soft skin beneath her ear, sending a current of pure sensation shooting through her. Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, savoring the exquisite lightness of his touch, the promise held within it. "Inevitable," he repeated, his voice a low thrum against her skin, his fingers gently threading into the loose curls behind her ear, pulling her subtly closer. "Yes, I believe it is." His face was close now, the scent of him, sophisticated, warm, a hint of something primal beneath, filling her senses, intoxicating her. She could see the tiny flecks of gold in his amber eyes, the faint shadow of stubble along his jawline, every detail sharpened by the intensity of the moment. Her own breath hitched, quickening, a frantic drumbeat in her chest. She leaned into his touch, a silent invitation, her lips slightly parted, a silent plea. The romantic tension was a living thing, swirling around them, a palpable force that pulled them closer and closer. He leaned closer still, his breath warm on her face, mingling with hers. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, joyous rhythm. "May I?" he whispered, his eyes asking the question, seeking her full consent, a deep respect in his gaze that made her trust him implicitly. She didn't speak. She simply tilted her head, her gaze a fervent yes, her whole being leaning to his. His lips, soft and hesitant at first, brushed against hers. It was a tentative exploration, a feather-light touch that promised more, a breath of anticipation. Then, with a soft sigh that seemed to escape both of them, his mouth settled more firmly, gently pressing. It was a kiss of exquisite tenderness, a slow unfolding, a revelation, a gentle tasting of her essence. She responded instantly, her own lips parting, inviting him deeper. He tasted of wine, and something uniquely Julian, a blend of strength and intoxicating vulnerability that drew her in. Her hand, almost without conscious thought, lifted to cup his cheek, her fingers feeling the slight rasp of his skin, the warmth of him, the powerful pulse beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more passionate. It wasn't rushed, but a slow, languid exploration, as if they had all the time in the world, as if time itself had ceased to exist. His tongue teased hers, a delicate dance, a soft query that she eagerly answered, her own tongue meeting his with a shy boldness. A soft moan escaped her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own, a pure expression of pleasure. He shifted, rising slightly from his armchair, pulling her gently from hers, until she was kneeling between his legs, her hands now clutching the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer, unwilling to break the connection. The velvet of her dress rustled as she moved, a soft whisper in the quiet room, a luxurious sound. His hands found her waist, strong and firm, drawing her even nearer until there was no space left between them, their bodies pressed together. A perfect fit. The heat emanating from his body seeped into hers, igniting a responding fire, a delicious warmth spreading through her veins. His kisses moved from her lips, trailing down her jawline, to the sensitive skin beneath her ear, sending shivers through her, making her arch into his touch. He breathed her in, a soft, satisfied sound escaping him, as if he had found something he had been searching for. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. "You are exquisite." Her fingers tangled in his hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer still, reveling in the feel of its softness, the subtle tension in his muscles, the raw power of him. She wanted to drown in the sensation, in the taste of him, in the intoxicating rush of being so utterly desired. He kissed his way back to her lips, drawing a soft gasp from her. This kiss was deeper, hungrier, a silent acknowledgement of the raw, undeniable attraction that had been simmering between them all evening, now fully unleashed. His hand moved from her waist, sliding slowly up her back, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, then sweeping upwards to cup the back of her head, deepening the angle of the kiss, a masterful command. The world outside, the suite, the city, the jazz, all faded into an indistinct hum. There was only the warmth of his lips, the taste of him, the feel of his body pressed against hers, the rapid beating of their hearts. He broke the kiss, just slightly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling, ragged and sweet. His thumbs stroked the delicate skin just beneath her ribcage, a butterfly touch that promised further exploration, a teasing caress. "You feel," he whispered, his voice husky, raw with emotion, "exactly as I imagined." She looked into his eyes, swimming with a passion that mirrored her own, a deep, primal yearning. "And you, Julian," she whispered back, her voice barely audible, "are more than I dared to imagine." His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there before he lowered his head once more, capturing her lips in another searing kiss. This time, there was no hesitation, only a fierce, hungry demand that she met with equal fervor, her body humming with a desperate need. His hands moved, with exquisite slowness, from her back to the side zipper of her dress. She felt the cool metal against her skin, the soft tug as he began to lower it. Her breath hitched, a thrill, a mix of apprehension and profound excitement, shot through her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, letting him guide her, trusting him implicitly. The zipper descended with a soft hiss, revealing the bare skin of her back. He kissed the exposed skin, his lips tracing a path down her spine, sending shivers through her, making her arch her back into his touch. The dress, a creation of silk and lace, now hung precariously around her hips, threatening to fall with every movement. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes dark with desire, alight with a consuming fire. "Elara," he breathed, his voice a low growl, a sound of pure masculine appreciation. He reached out, his fingers gently pushing the silk strap of her dress off her shoulder, then the other. The dress pulled around her waist, revealing the delicate lace of her slip, the subtle curve of her breasts beneath, a tantalizing glimpse. Her arms, still around his neck, tightened, pulling him even closer. She felt beautifully exposed, vulnerable, yet utterly safe in his presence, cherished and adored. The flickering firelight danced on her skin, painting her in hues of gold and shadow, making her feel like a living work of art. He simply looked at her, his amber eyes taking in every curve, every shadow, a silent reverence in his gaze that made her feel cherished, adored. He didn't rush, didn't make her feel scrutinized, but rather appreciated, celebrated, as if she were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "You are magnificent," he murmured, his voice raw with emotion, a tremor in his tone. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace along her collarbone, then down the swell of her breast, just above the fabric. The touch was light, electrifying, sending a jolt of pleasure deep into her core. Her nipples, already pebble-hard with anticipation, tightened further. She could feel the rapid pulse in her throat, matching the frantic beat of her heart, a symphony of arousal. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the delicate lace, sending another wave of sensation through her. "May I taste you, Elara?" he whispered, the question a plea, a promise, a soft invitation. She nodded, her eyes closed, her head thrown back slightly, offering herself to him, her every nerve alight. His lips, warm and wet, pressed against the lace covering her breast, then moved lower, his tongue tracing the swell of her flesh, sending a jolt of pleasure deep into her core. He suckled softly, tenderly, through the fabric, and a soft gasp escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated bliss. Her hands found his hair again, holding him close, urging him on, a silent command for more. The world was shrinking, focusing entirely on the intimate space between them, on the exquisite sensations he was evoking, on the profound connection that was blossoming. He slowly straightened, his eyes still dark with desire, his breathing ragged, a mirror of her own. He reached for her hand once more, his thumb stroking her palm, a comforting, grounding touch. "Come," he said, his voice a low command, a gentle pull. He led her towards the grand four-poster bed, its sheer silk drapes whispering around them like secrets, like promises. The soft glow from the fireplace cast a warm, inviting light on the crisp white sheets, beckoning them closer. The invitation was clear, undeniable, a silent promise of deeper intimacy. She walked beside him, her heart thrumming, her body alight with anticipation. Every step was a surrender, an embrace of the profound intimacy that awaited them, a journey into the unknown. He stopped beside the bed, turning to face her. His hands went to the buttons of his shirt, slowly, deliberately unfastening each one. Her gaze followed the movement, mesmerized by the subtle play of muscle beneath his shirt, the tanned skin revealed with each unbuttoning, a tantalizing glimpse of the powerful man beneath the elegant facade. The shirt parted, revealing a broad, muscular chest, lightly dusted with dark hair, a truly magnificent sight. He shrugged it off, letting it fall to the floor with a soft sigh, joining her dress in a silken puddle. He stood before her, a vision of masculine grace and power, his eyes never leaving hers, a silent question, an unspoken promise in their depth. He reached for her, his hands gently framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones, a tender caress. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice full of reverence, "this night is ours. To discover, to explore, to simply feel." Her lips curved into a soft, willing smile. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, then trailing down his neck, over his collarbone, feeling the warmth of his skin, the powerful beat of his heart beneath her fingertips, a rhythm that now matched her own. The air was thick with unspoken desires, with the scent of their mingled arousal, with the promise of more. The velvet secrets of the night were indeed unfurling, slowly, exquisitely, around them, drawing them into a deeper, more passionate embrace. The journey had just begun. Her fingers, having explored the warm landscape of his neck and collarbone, now drifted lower, tentative yet emboldened by the silent invitation in his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture that drew her closer still. The silk of her gown, a mere whisper against her skin, felt suddenly too substantial, a barrier she yearned to shed. His hand, which had been resting lightly on the small of her back, moved, a slow, deliberate journey upwards, tracing the curve of her spine, sending shivers dancing along her nerves. When his thumb brushed the delicate lace of her shoulder strap, a gasp, soft and involuntary, escaped her lips, lost against the hungry press of his. He deepened the kiss then, a possessive yet tender claim, his mouth moving with a languid expertise that melted her resolve, dissolved the last vestiges of hesitation. His tongue sought hers, a slow, sensual dance that mirrored the unfolding intimacy between them. She responded without thought, her own tongue meeting his, exploring, tasting, a delicious surrender to the moment. The scent of him, an intoxicating mix of wood smoke, crisp night air, and his own unique masculine essence, filled her senses, wrapping around her like a warm, comforting cloak that promised exquisite heat beneath. Her hands, no longer content with idle tracing, found purchase in the thick strands of his hair, pulling him closer still, tilting his head just so, to allow for a deeper, more consuming kiss. She felt the rumble of a low groan in his chest, a primal sound that vibrated through her, igniting an answering fire deep within her belly. Her body, already thrumming with anticipation, arched subtly against his, a silent plea for more, for closer contact, for the complete eradication of any space between them. He understood. With a soft murmur against her lips, he broke the kiss, only to pepper her jawline, her earlobe, the sensitive hollow beneath her ear with feather-light kisses that sent tremors through her. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice a husky caress that sent shivers down her spine, so incredibly beautiful. His gaze, dark and intense, devoured her, making her feel utterly exposed, yet cherished. He reached out, his fingers delicately plucking at the thin fabric of her shoulder strap, slowly, deliberately, easing it down her arm. The cool air of the cabin brushed against her bared skin, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from his touch, from the fire in his eyes. She watched him, mesmerized, as he peeled away the silk, revealing the soft curve of her shoulder, the swell of her breast above the gown's low neckline. Each movement was a promise, a slow, exquisite unveiling that heightened the anticipation to an almost unbearable pitch. Her breath hitched as his fingers, warm and calloused, brushed over the delicate lace of her chemise just above her heart. He didn't rush, but savored the moment, his eyes never leaving hers, seeking and finding the answering desire reflected there. He lowered his head, pressing a soft kiss to the newly bared skin of her shoulder, letting his lips linger, tasting her, before trailing a path down towards the curve of her collarbone. She tilted her head back, offering herself to his ministrations, her eyes fluttering closed as a wave of pure sensation washed over her. He pulled back slightly, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs stroking the soft skin beneath her eyes. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice thick with concern, yet laced with a deeper, more primal hunger. "No," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Only burning." A slow, knowing smile curved his lips, a predatory yet gentle expression that made her heart pound even harder. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes, a question, an invitation hanging in the air. He leaned in again, this time his lips barely brushing hers, a tantalizing tease that left her aching for more. "Let me warm you then," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her. His hands moved from her face, down her arms, finding the delicate material of her sleeves. With expert slowness he began to ease the silk from her, first one arm, then the other, until the gown pulled around her waist, leaving her in only her lace chemise and drawer. The soft lamplight caught the delicate embroidery of the lace, casting her in a soft, ethereal glow. She felt a blush creep up her neck, but her gaze never wavered from his. A silent challenge, a breathless invitation. He took a step back, his eyes devouring the sight of her, his admiration a tangible force that warmed her more effectively than any fire. "You are breathtaking," he said, his voice raw with emotion. He reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate lace of her chemise, following the line of her décolletage, down to the soft swell of her breasts. She shivered, not from cold, but from the exquisite torment of his light touch. Her own hands, emboldened by his escalating passion, found the buttons of his shirt. Her fingers, trembling slightly, worked at the fastenings, one by one, releasing the heavy fabric, revealing the taut, muscular planes of his chest. The scent of him grew stronger, more intoxicating, filling her head, clouding her judgment, leaving only instinct. She pushed the shirt back from his shoulders, her palms smoothing over the warm, firm skin, reveling in the hard planes of his chest, the defined muscles that flexed beneath her touch. A light dusting of dark hair feathered across his pectorals, tapering down towards his navel, an irresistible path she yearned to follow. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that thrilled her, as her fingers kneaded the warm skin of his chest, her thumbs circling his hardened nipples through the thin fabric of his undershirt. He caught her hands, pressing them against his chest, holding them there, letting her feel the powerful beat of his heart, now thundering against her palms. "You have no idea," he whispered, his eyes dark with unleashed desire, "what you do to me." "Oh, I think I do," she replied, her voice husky, a newfound confidence blooming within her. Her gaze dropped to his trousers. A silent question. A bold invitation. A slow smile spread across his face, a mixture of amusement and raw desire. He released her hands, letting them roam freely, while his own hands returned to her, slipping around her waist, drawing her flush against him. The friction of their bodies, clothed though they still were, sent sparks flying. She could feel the hard ridge of his arousal pressing against her, a testament to his burgeoning desire, a mirror of her own throbbing need. "Let's get comfortable, shall we?" he murmured, his lips brushing her temple, then her earlobe, sending a jolt of pleasure through her. He gently guided her towards the hearth, where a thick, soft rug lay spread before the roaring fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across the room, painting them in hues of gold and amber, turning the cabin into a sanctuary of warmth and passion. He knelt, pulling her down with him onto the plush rug. The fire crackled, its warmth a comforting embrace, yet it paled in comparison to the inferno igniting between them. He sat back on his heels, his eyes still locked with hers. A silent conversation passing between them, a shared understanding of the exquisite journey they were about to embark upon. His hands, with a tender reverence that made her heart ache, reached for the hem of her chemise. Slowly, deliberately he began to lift it, his gaze never leaving her face, watching for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of doubt. There was none. Only a breathless anticipation, an eager surrender. The lace glided upwards, over her stomach, revealing the taut curve of her belly, the delicate indentation of her navel. He paused, his fingers tracing the line of her hip, then moving lower, to the elastic band of her drawers. She arched slightly, offering herself, her breath catching in her throat. He eased the fabric down, over her hips, her thighs, until it joined the silk gown in a shimmering pool, around her ankles. She stood before him, bathed in the golden glow of the fire, completely unclad, vulnerable yet utterly powerful in her nakedness. His eyes, dark with adoration and raw hunger, swept over her, lingering on the soft curve of her breasts, the delicate swell of her hips, the shadowed valley between her thighs. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped one breast, his thumb brushing over her already hardened nipple. A gasp escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound of pure pleasure. Her head fell back, her eyes closing as sensation flooded her. "You are perfection," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his thumb continuing its exquisite torment. He leaned in, his mouth finding the peak he had just caressed, suckling gently, drawing her deeper into the intoxicating spiral of desire. Her fingers, tangled in his hair, urged him closer, a silent plea for more, for everything. She felt the warmth of his mouth, the soft tug, the gentle rasp of his stubble against her sensitive skin. A wave of pure, unadulterated pleasure coursed through her, tightening every muscle, making her toes curl. He moved to the other breast, giving it equal, devoted attention, his hands supporting her, holding her steady as her legs threatened to give way beneath her. While he lavished attention on her breasts, her own hands, now free, went back to his shirt, pulling it fully off, tossing it carelessly aside. Then, with a boldness that surprised even herself, she reached for the buckle of his belt. Her fingers fumbled slightly, but with a shared glance that held both amusement and intense desire. He helped her, his hands guiding hers, their fingers brushing, sending fresh sparks through them both. The belt was undone, the button of his trousers released. She pushed the denim down, slowly, savoring the moment, the gradual unveiling of his powerful body. His hips, his muscular thighs, and then, gloriously, his engorged erection sprang free, thick and throbbing. A magnificent testament to his desire. Her breath hitched. It was even more impressive than she had imagined. A beautiful, powerful extension of the man she desired so fiercely. He stood then, pulling her up with him, until they were standing face to face, naked skin against naked skin. The contact was electric, a searing heat that consumed every inch of her. Her breasts brushed against his chest, her stomach against his, her pubic mound pressed against the hard ridge of his arousal. A low moan escaped her, a sound that was half pain, half pleasure, a yearning that was almost unbearable. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into an even tighter embrace, their bodies molding together as if they were carved from the same stone. His lips found hers again, a deep, consuming kiss that spoke volumes, a promise of the exquisite pleasure to come. Their tongues danced, their teeth nipped, their breaths mingled, hot and ragged. He lifted her, effortlessly, her legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, her arms circling his neck. He carried her a few steps, then gently lowered her onto the soft rug before the fire, laying her back against the plush sheepskin, her body cushioned by its luxurious softness. He loomed above her, his eyes blazing, his chest heaving, a magnificent primal force. "Are you ready?" he whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of adoration and barely contained urgency. She nodded, unable to speak, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fierce desire. Her hips lifted instinctively, an unspoken invitation, a desperate plea. He knelt between her legs, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the delicate folds of her femininity, now open and glistening, ready for him. His fingers, warm and gentle, brushed against her inner thigh, sending a jolt of exquisite sensation through her. He parted her, just slightly, his thumb teasing her clitoris, a light, teasing touch that made her gasp and arch her back. "So wet," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "So ready." He lowered his head, his tongue flicking out, tasting her, a warm, wet caress that sent shivers of pure ecstasy through her. She cried out, her hands gripping the rug, her body trembling uncontrollably as his mouth worked its magic, teasing, swirling, suckling, driving her closer and closer to the precipice. She writhed beneath him, her hips lifting, seeking more, needing more. The pleasure was almost unbearable, an exquisite agony that built and built, threatening to overwhelm her. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling gently, her legs tightening around his head, urging him deeper, faster. He obliged, his tongue becoming more insistent, more demanding, pushing her over the edge. A scream tore from her throat, a primal cry of release as her body convulsed, waves of pure, undiluted pleasure washing over her, leaving her breathless and shaking, utterly spent. He continued for a moment longer, savoring her release before slowly, reluctantly, pulling away. He looked up at her, his eyes soft with tenderness, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. "Beautiful," he whispered again. "Always beautiful." She lay panting, her body still trembling from the intensity of her climax, her eyes heavy-lidded as she looked up at him. "Now you," she breathed, her voice hoarse, her hand reaching for him, stroking the magnificent length of his erection, which still stood proud and engorged. His eyes darkened with renewed desire. "My turn, is it?" He chuckled, a deep, rich sound that vibrated through her. He shifted, positioning himself between her legs, his hard shaft pressing against her sensitive core. The contact was electric, rekindling the embers of her desire, making her ache for him anew. He paused, looking into her eyes, seeking permission, a shared moment of connection before the final plunge. She met his gaze, her own eyes brimming with love and desire, and nodded, a silent, eager assent. Slowly, exquisitely, he began to enter her. The tip of his erection nudged against her entrance, a gentle pressure that made her gasp. He pushed a little further, stretching her, filling her, inch by agonizing inch. She clenched her muscles around him, welcoming his fullness, reveling in the sensation of being stretched and filled. Her body, still sensitive from her recent climax, thrummed with a renewed, deeper pleasure. He paused again, allowing her body to adjust, allowing them both to savor the feeling of being utterly, intimately connected. He was deep inside her, filling her completely, a perfect fit. Their eyes met again, and this time, the look they exchanged was one of pure, unadulterated bliss, a profound connection that transcended the physical. Then with a low groan he began to move. Slow, deliberate thrusts at first, each one drawing a soft moan from her, each one driving him deeper, stretching her further. She wrapped her legs tighter around his waist, pulling him closer, urging him on. Her hands found his shoulders, her nails digging gently into his skin as the rhythm intensified. Faster now, their bodies moving in a primal dance, a symphony of thrusts and moans, of skin slapping against skin. The fire crackled, casting their entwined forms in a flickering golden light, illuminating the passion that consumed them. Her head fell back, her eyes closed, her mouth open in a silent scream of pleasure. Each thrust was a hammer blow, driving her deeper into sensation, closer to the edge once more. He leaned down, burying his face in her neck, his breath hot against her skin, his lips nuzzling, tasting. "Say my name," he whispered, his voice ragged, demanding. "Say it." "Liam," she cried out, the name tearing from her throat, a declaration, a surrender. "Oh, Liam!" The sound of his name seemed to ignite a fresh spark within him. His thrusts became more powerful, more urgent, driving her to the brink. She could feel the tension building within her again, a familiar, exquisite pressure that tightened in her core. Her muscles clenched around him, milking him, driving him even wilder. Her world narrowed to the sensations of his body against hers, the scent of their mingled arousal, the sounds of their ragged breaths and passionate moans. The rhythm became a frantic, desperate beat, driving them higher and higher, towards a shared precipice. "I'm close," he gasped, his voice strained, his body trembling above her. "Me too," she whimpered, her own climax building rapidly, a wave threatening to crash over her. With a final powerful thrust he cried out, his body going rigid above her, his seed spilling deep inside her, a hot pulsing release that mingled with her own. As she gasped, her body convulsing around him, waves of pleasure washing over her, even more intense than the last. They lay tangled together, breathless and spent, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in unison. The fire continued to crackle, casting a warm, comforting glow over them, as if blessing their union. He slowly collapsed onto her, his weight heavy but welcome, his head resting in the crook of her neck. His breath was hot against her skin, his body still twitching with the echoes of his climax. She ran her fingers through his damp hair, soothing him, cherishing the feeling of his weight, his warmth, his presence. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a deep, abiding contentment that filled her to the brim. After a long moment he shifted, lifting his head to look at her, his eyes soft and tender, filled with an emotion that made her heart swell. He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then finally, a lingering, tender kiss to her lips. "My Alara," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "My beautiful Alara." The sound of her name, spoken with such reverence, such love, brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't realized how much she yearned to hear it from him, how deeply she longed for this connection. "Liam," she replied, her voice thick with emotion, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. He rolled onto his side, still entwined with her, pulling her close, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her securely against him, their legs still tangled, their bodies still humming with the aftershocks of their passion. They lay in comfortable silence for a long time, listening to the gentle hiss of the fire, the soft sounds of the night outside the cabin. The moon, a sliver of silver, peeked through the window, casting a faint, ethereal light across the room. She felt safe, cherished, utterly loved. "I never imagined," she whispered eventually, her voice barely audible, "it could be like this." He tightened his embrace. "Nor I, Elara. Not with anyone else." His voice was low, filled with the sincerity that resonated deep within her soul. This is different. More." She smiled, pressing a soft kiss to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her lips. "Yes," she agreed, "much more." The night deepened, but the fire in their hearts, the warmth between their bodies, burned ever brighter. The journey, far from over, had simply transitioned into a new, deeper phase. The promise of the dawn held no fear, only anticipation of waking next to him, of discovering new facets of their connection, of continuing this extraordinary, sensual adventure. The velvet secrets of the night had unfurled, revealing not just desire, but a profound love that had been waiting patiently to be awakened. And as they drifted towards sleep in each other's arms, the world outside faded away, leaving only the two of them, intertwined, complete. The story of their bodies, their hearts, was only just beginning to be written. The first tendrils of dawn, soft as a lover's whisper, painted the room in hues of rose and pearl. She stirred, not with the abruptness of waking, but with a slow, delicious unfurling, like a blossom opening to the sun. His arm was a warm, heavy weight across her waist, his breath a gentle rhythm against the nape of her neck. The scent of him, a primal, intoxicating blend of musk, fresh skin, and the lingering aroma of their shared passion, enveloped her, a comforting blanket woven from memory and presence. She didn't open her eyes immediately, wanting to prolong the suspended magic of the moment, to feel the quiet hum of his heart against her back, the subtle shift of his body aligning perfectly with hers. When her eyelids finally fluttered open, the room was bathed in a gentle luminosity. She turned carefully, propping herself on an elbow, her gaze tracing the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble that shadowed it, the curve of his lips, still soft from sleep. A tender ache bloomed in her chest, a feeling far deeper and more resonant than the intense desire of the night. This was love, pure and undeniable, a quiet confidence settling in her soul. She reached out, her fingertips feather-light as they brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead. He stirred then, a soft groan escaping his lips as he blinked slowly, his eyes, the color of warm amber, finding hers. A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners, full of a sleep-softened tenderness that melted her heart anew. "Morning," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver of pleasure down her spine. He pulled her closer, his arm tightening around her, pressing her back against his chest. Her hand rested instinctively on his bare chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath her palm. It felt utterly right, utterly natural, to be entwined like this. The world outside, still, a distant whisper. "Morning," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. She leaned into his embrace, her head resting on his shoulder, his chin brushing her hair. The silence that followed was not empty, but rich with unspoken understanding, with the echoes of their shared intimacy, and the quiet promise of a future yet to unfold. They lay there for a long time, simply existing in each other's space, absorbing the warmth, the scent, the undeniable truth of their connection. The previous night had been a wildfire, consuming all in its path. This morning was the glowing embers, radiating a profound, enduring heat. Eventually, hunger, both physical and emotional, began to stir. He kissed her temple, a soft, lingering pressure that spoke volumes. "I could stay like this forever," he confessed, his voice husky. "Me too," she breathed, tightening her hold on him. But the world, even a world as perfect as theirs in this bed, beckoned. He finally shifted, swinging his legs out of bed, a sigh escaping him as he stretched, his muscles rippling under his skin. She watched him, still mesmerized, a blush rising on her cheeks as he turned to offer her a hand. "Come," he invited, his eyes sparkling with mischief and affection. "Let's find some coffee, and maybe, just maybe, continue this exploration of us." They moved through the sun-dappled villa like two people who had always belonged together. The air was crisp, carrying the distant scent of dew and blooming jasmine. He made coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, while she gathered fresh fruit from a basket on the counter. There was an easy rhythm to their movements, a comfortable choreography born of intuition. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same mug, sending a jolt of electricity through them both, a reminder of the potent current that still flowed between them. They sat on the veranda, overlooking a tranquil garden, the rising sun painting golden streaks across the leaves. The coffee was strong and hot, the fruit sweet and juicy. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences and lingering glances. They spoke of small things, of dreams, of past experiences that had shaped them, weaving a tapestry of shared stories that only deepened their bond. He told her about his passion for ancient history, how he'd always wanted to visit certain ruins. She shared her love for painting, how the colors of the world spoke to her. Each revelation was a new thread, intertwining their lives further. "I feel like I've known you forever," she confessed, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her coffee cup. "And yet like I'm only just beginning to know you." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a simple gesture that conveyed a world of tenderness. "That's exactly how I feel," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's as if my life was a melody, and yours was the missing harmony. Suddenly everything makes sense. Everything is richer, more complete." A lump formed in her throat. She met his gaze, and in his eyes she saw not just desire, but a profound, unwavering commitment. The question hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. "What now?" "Oh." He seemed to read her thoughts. "This isn't just a night," he stated, his grip on her hand tightening reassuringly. "This isn't just a fleeting moment of magic, is it?" She shook her head, tears pricking at her eyes. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "It's everything. It's the beginning." He smiled, a radiant, heart-stopping smile that filled her with warmth. "Good," he said, leaning forward. "Because I don't want it to end. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to discover every facet of you, every secret, every dream. I want to build a life with you." The words, so direct, so earnest, resonated deep within her. Her heart swelled with a joy so intense it felt almost painful. "I want that too," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "More than anything." He rose from his chair, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. His eyes searched hers, full of adoration and a profound certainty. "Then let's make it so," he vowed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. And then he kissed her, a kiss that was different from the passionate fire of the night before. This kiss was gentle, deep, and infinitely tender. It was a promise, a confirmation, a sealing of their shared destiny. It tasted of coffee and fruit, of lingering sleep and fresh beginnings, of a love that had blossomed overnight and now promised to endure. They spent the rest of the day in a blissful haze, exploring the villa grounds, walking hand in hand through sun-drenched paths, sharing stories and dreams, solidifying the foundation of their burgeoning future. There were quiet moments of shared laughter, moments of profound silence, and always the comforting awareness of each other's presence. They cooked dinner together, a simple meal transformed into a feast by the warmth of their connection. The sensuality wasn't explicit now, but woven into every glance, every touch, every shared smile. It was in the way he looked at her across the table, the possessive yet tender light in his eyes. It was in the soft brush of her fingers against his arm as she passed him a dish. As dusk settled, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, they found themselves back on the veranda, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the stars emerge, one by one, like scattered diamonds on black velvet. He held her close, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The air was cool, but their bodies generated a warmth that transcended the temperature. "This place," she mused, her voice soft, "feels like it was waiting for us. For this." "Perhaps it was," he agreed, his lips brushing her hair. "Or perhaps we were waiting for each other, and this place was simply the perfect stage for our awakening." He tightened his embrace. "I never imagined I could feel this way, so completely seen, completely loved." "Me neither," she whispered, tracing patterns on his chest. "It's like coming home to a place I didn't even know I was searching for." He kissed the top of her head, a long, reverent kiss. "Then let's make this home, in every sense of the word, not just this villa, but us." He paused, then continued, his voice imbued with a quiet intensity. "I want to wake up with you tomorrow, and the day after, and every day for the rest of our lives. I want to face every dawn and every dusk with you by my side." She tilted her head back, her eyes shining in the dim light. "I want that more than anything," she repeated, her voice full of certainty and boundless love. "This extraordinary, sensual adventure, I want to continue it with you, forever." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering, full of a love that had been patiently awakened and now burned brighter than any star. He leaned in, and their lips met, not with the fiery urgency of their first kiss, but with a profound, tender devotion. It was a kiss that sealed promises, celebrated beginnings, and acknowledged a love that was not just written in their bodies, but etched into the very fabric of their souls. As the night deepened around them, holding them in its gentle embrace, they knew, with an absolute certainty, that their story, far from just beginning, had finally found its true unending chapter. They were intertwined, complete, and forever,